This is CPM Precalculus, Chapter 2, number 88. Solve. So here we're giving a system of two equations, right? We have one equation here and a second equation here. And we have two different variables. We have x, right? And we also have y. So we have two variables, two unknown variables, right? And two equations. That means we can solve for both variables. Alright, because 2 and 2, that means we can do it. So let's go ahead and do this. What we want to do is find one of these equations. Let's go ahead and start with this one. And we want to solve for one of the variables. Okay, so x squared plus y is equal to 6. Okay, so you want to start looking at it and say, well, would it be easier for me to solve for x, or would it be easier for me to solve for y? Okay, so solving for it means just getting it alone on one side of the equation, isolating it. And since x is squared, that makes it a little bit more difficult because that requires an extra step. So let's just solve for y. So if I want to solve for y, I subtract x squared from both sides, and I get y is equal to 6 minus x squared, right? That is solving for y. I have y equals, right, on one side of the equation. And therefore, I can go ahead and plug this back in to the second equation and replace whatever I have for y, and I can replace it with 6 minus x squared. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this. X squared minus 2y is equal to negative 3, right? And now I'm going to plug in for y. Y is only here once, but wherever I see y in this equation, I'm going to plug in 6 minus x squared. So instead of y, I have 6 minus x squared equals to negative 3. Okay? So now I have an equation with just one variable, right? That's just x. So I want to solve for x. So let's first of all, let's make, let's get away this minus. So that becomes plus a negative. Let's distribute this negative 2. So that's x squared plus negative 2 times 6 is negative 12. Negative 2 times, remember this is a negative x squared, is positive 2x squared equals to negative 3. Okay, let's combine like terms. We have an x squared term and an x squared term. So 1x squared and 2x squared is 3x squared minus 12 is equal to negative 3. We want to solve for x, so let's go ahead and add 12 to both sides to get rid of this 12, right? So we get 3x squared is equal to 12 plus negative 3 is going to be 9, right? How do we get x alone? Well, let's get rid of the coefficient 3 by dividing both sides by 3. These cancel out. We're left with x squared is equal to 3. How do we get x? Well, what's the opposite of squared? We know if we square root both sides, right, then that gives us x on the left, right? Square root of x squared is x. And just always remember that when you're square rooting a squared, it's going to give us plus or minus, right? Square root of 3. Okay? So here we go. This is our x value, and actually we have two x values, right? And that's fair. We have two different x values. So solving this equation, we need to find two variables, right? So we know x, and we need to know y. So how do we find y? Well, since we already found one of the equations in terms of y, right? If we plug our x into that equation, so let's go ahead and do it. So here we have two x's, so I'm going to split this up, right? We have y is equal to 6 minus x squared, and y is equal to 6 minus x squared. This one I'm going to use x is equal to positive square root of 3, and this one I'm going to use x is equal to negative square root of 3. Okay, so if I plug in positive square root of 3, I get positive square root of 3 squared here. Well, what is square root of 3 squared? Well, the square cancels with the square root, right? So that's just equal to 6 minus, remember, parentheses exponents. So exponent's going to make that just 3. 6 minus 3 is 3. So one y value is 3. What if I plug in negative square root of 3? 6 minus negative square root of 3 squared. Well, again, when I square this, right, it's going to become a positive, so it's just going to be 6 minus, what is square root and square do? They cancel each other out, so this is just going to be positive 3 in here, right? So 6 minus positive 3 is 3 again. So my y value, right, I'm solving for my y value, is 3 and 3. So my solution then is going to be x is equal to plus or minus square root of 3, and my y is equal to just, remember we had two answers but they're the same, so I'm just going to say it once rather than repeat it. It's just equal to 3. Okay? So this is the solution to this system of equations, right? System of equations because we have two of them and we're solving for the values of x and y, the variables. All right, so that ends CPM Precalculus Chapter 2, number 88.